let's have a look at this story. Plan to increase youth minimum wage could be delayed. Now, this refers back to a promise that Labour made in their election manifesto about all of this. Let's have a look at the promise. They said that all adults would get the same minimum wage effectively. So Labour would remove the discriminatory age bands so that all adults are entitled to the same minimum wage, and that would deliver a pay rise to hundreds of thousands of workers across the UK. Well, let's speak to D-J Bennett. He is the founder of a small carpentry and joinery business in Surrey and got in touch with the BBC through your voice. Thanks so much for speaking to us today, DJ. Just tell us about how you think the rises in the minimum wage, particularly for young people, might impact the workforce.
So firstly, I think having young people in the workforce is fantastic. They bring such great energy and they are imperative to the survival of any industry, but they do take time to train. And when you're that age and you're young, you're probably living at home, you're with mum and dad, you've got a roof over your head, your bills are minimal. It's not about the money, it's about life experience. And I think small businesses operate under small margins as it is, and everything's going up. And, it used to be a case of, do we want to train the young? Now it's a case of, can we afford to train the young? And I think you're going to deny a generation an opportunity to go into the world of work. Rishi Sunak upped the minimum wage before the general election. Keir Starmer's done it twice. The national insurance contributions have also gone up. So the odds are forever getting stacked against employers. And I think there seems to be a bit of lack of common sense. And I'd love to know what the thought process is throughout all of this. Because I think in my industry, which is construction, you're going to see a huge gap in the market if wages keep going up at vast rates. If you look at the wages from 2019, the apprentice wage was £3.90. It's now going to go up to £8. That's a big increase. It's over double in 6 years. So I'd love to know the thought process behind all of it, really.
Well, let's find out. DJ, stay with us. I'm just going to bring in our Labour MP here, Joe. What do you say to that? That actually this could have the opposite effect, in fact, on recruiting young people, because businesses might look at them and think that actually they can't afford to hire them.
Well, the fact that we have close to 1 million young people out of education, employment or work should be a national emergency. So I'm glad that we're having this debate about it. And I think the government have been clear that we need to do more to support those young people and employers. So, for example, from April, we'll see the Youth Guarantee Scheme roll out. That will mean companies like DJs will have the option of taking on somebody who has been out of work for 18 months on universal credit. That will be paid 25 hours a week on the minimum wage by the government to get people that start and de-risk that employment. We're also going to reform the apprenticeship system, which DJ also mentioned, to make it easier for SMEs to take on apprenticeships, because we know the way the levy is currently structured has meant that it has been too expensive for some employers.
That's small and medium-sized enterprises.
For small and medium-sized enterprises, so we're going to reform that. And of course, that goes alongside the Low Pay Commission, which is independent and has employer representatives on the board, which looks at the level of the national minimum wage. Now, I'm incredibly proud as a Labour MP that we created the national minimum wage in this country that has helped to lift millions of people out of poverty. And at the time of that introduction, everyone opposed it then. Certainly the Conservatives did. So I think the national minimum wage is a very good thing. And the Low Wage Commission will take a look at employment data, labour market data, listen to all sides, and will make recommendations for years to come.
I just want to go back to DJ. Would any of that encourage you to take on a younger worker?
I think as long as common sense applies. I mean, tradesmen, being myself, we're very simple people. As long as the system isn't too hard. I've had 5 apprentices in the last 5 years, and the system seems to be getting harder and harder and harder. And obviously, it all comes down from the top. And I think I'm at the point where it's not quite feasible for me to train up another young person, which is a real shame, because I think lots of policies are made without talking to the people on the bottom. You need to see how this is all going to be implemented and rolled out and stuff. And I think as long as that's the case throughout the whole process, then yes, all these sort of reforms should work. But it ultimately comes down to money. That's why we all do what we do. Whereas before it used to be, the passion to want to pass on your trade. As long as that passion is still alive, then I think, everything should work out.
And DJ, just in terms of the specifics about equalising the minimum wage, so what it would mean is that someone who's 18 or 19 would be eventually paid the same as someone who is 21, 22, 23. I mean, would that put you off maybe hiring the 18-year-old?
Massively, because like I said earlier, it's about money. Can you afford to take on a young person? And say, for example, if I'm on a job and I've got to build, I think Labour's pledged to build X amount of houses, and I've got to, say, for example, pitch 4 roofs by the end of the week. I'm going to, for a few pennies or pounds more per hour, I'm going to employ somebody with the skills. They've got a lower risk factor of making a mistake, and it's going to get the job done more effectively at the end of the day. So I think you're losing the whole, the ethics and the value of wanting to train up a young person. Like I say, it's not about, when you're young, it's not about the money so much. It's about getting the life experience. I think you are going to deny a generation of life, the experience to go into the world of work if you outprice them from the market.
Layla, what do you say to that on the specifics of equalising the minimum wage? Do you think there is a risk there?
Look, whenever you've got extra burdens, particularly on small and medium-sized businesses, they have to, in the end, make ends meet. Unless they can make profit at the end of the day, they can't employ anyone because they go under. And the bit that Joe was valiantly trying not to say was we are in part at this position because of a couple of budgets that have really hammered small and medium-sized businesses, in particular the employers' national insurance contributions rise, which so many have told me is the core of why they had to decide to delay or even scrap plans to do training and hire young people. It was the reason why the Liberal Democrats in the last budget had suggested a £5 cut on VAT for hospitality, because hospitality, by and large, tends to employ younger people, revitalises the high streets and so on. But the core of this, let's be very honest, is an economy that is not doing all that well. And that started with, the botched deal that was struck with Europe by Boris Johnson under the Conservatives, and now successive budgets by Labour that have not shifted the dial. What the Liberal Democrats have been suggesting is we need to start being a bit more bold. We accept that things like the youth mobility schemes and the veterinary agreements are helpful, but the thing that's really going to start shifting the dial is something like a customs union.
I just want to come back to...
And that is what's going to give businesses the certainty
we'll
they need for the
out in a second. Just to come back to the minimum wage, let's have a look, because we've got the current rates here in front of us. They are due to all go up in April. So, Layla, does your party think that these should all be the same, or certainly from the 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, should they all be paid the same?
Broadly speaking, we believe that if someone is doing the same work as someone else, their age shouldn't be part of that equation. And young people in particular have been hammered.
Right, so you two agree on this then?
But it is important that it is listened to with small businesses and that the whole of their budgets are being taken into account. And I'm afraid that is where Labour and the Liberal Democrats do not agree. We do not think that the national insurance rises in employers' national insurance was a good idea.
But you would be happy to then increase
But I don't think we should be balancing the books off the back of the young and the poor. I mean, remember, there are some young people, and I met many of them actually over the last week, who it's their first jobs. They don't have a bank of mum and dad to rely on. They don't have a spare room to go to. They themselves are trying to make ends meet themselves. I think as a principle, I agree with that. But we need to do it in a way that is common sense to small businesses and listen to them. So I don't mind the delay, but I think the principle I would agree with. Yes.
Right, I'm going to bring Emily in a second, but DJ, just to come back to you, so that we've got two parties here who actually agree that an 18-year-old should be paid the same as someone quite a bit older.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think time will tell how this is going to fare out. Again, only in my industry can I comment on it, which is construction. I think it's vital to keep the fresh blood and the young blood coming through. And again, for a few pennies or pounds, or even the same money, you can bring somebody with more experience. You're more likely going to do that because they're going to get the job done. I mean, you're not going to, as somebody who's trained up 5 people and I want to train up more, I'm not going to automatically decide to pay the person with no experience the same amount of money as the person with experience, because it's not going to be productive in the slightest. I think you need to look at, again, in my sector, you need to look at the long-term effects. Short-term effects, I don't think you're going to see much at all. I think long-term effects is in 3, 4, 5 years plus, you're going to see a huge gap in the market. Again, tradesmen, we've built this country, we're still building this country. I think there's already a shortage as it is. I think you're going to, again, outprice the smaller businesses and then make the market, make more gaps in the market, I think.
Emily, what do you think?
I think he's absolutely right. We should be listening to him. I don't think Labour has listened to business at all. And they've made terrible decisions. I mean, the NI contributions, their employer's bill, which has got some terrible side effects of red tape for small to medium-sized businesses. We're seeing a huge rise in unemployment, 331,000 since they came to power, but really a terrible rise in sort of youth unemployment. And we've had 2 minimum wage rises since they came to power. Another is still due to come into effect in April by Rachel Reeves. And so to now be adding, this minimum wage for 18 plus individuals, my husband works in hospitality, that there's always this idea that comes from a sort of ideology from Labour that they are against employers. Most employers, like DJ, they want to train young people. They care about young people. They are the future of their business. But as he says, there has to be common sense to the point where there are all these other pressures on businesses at the moment. Some of them induced by Labour, some because growth is being stifled in this country.
DJ made the point that Rishi Sunak actually put up the minimum wage.
Yes, but then don't keep doing it even more. This has been huge above inflation. We've had 2, and now they're going for 18
Do you think he was wrong to do it
plus.
back then, Rishi Sunak?
I can't remember what the exact figure was. I'm not against minimum wage rises if the economy is going up. And remember, the economy was growing under Rishi Sunak. Let's leave, the ghastly Liz Truss aside. But it's growing much slower than it was. You actually ruined that growth when you came into power with that first budget. And I do think, as he says, small to medium-sized businesses, they are literally, they are the foundations of this country. And we hope that those businesses then become big global businesses. We cannot keep punishing them.
But what about
ideology and there's common sense.
What about Layla's argument that people should be paid the same if they're doing the same job?
I don't think that you can align, as he says, someone who's coming in sort of 18 years old, who has no skills. That employer is taking a risk on them. And as I said, they're trying to put this through, they've announced it, by the way, at a time when youth employment is rocketing. And I hate to go back to AI and artificial intelligence, but there is a fear also that artificial intelligence is going to make those very sort of early jobs tougher to take. Probably not in construction, but certainly in white-collar jobs. So we're just hammering the youth.
Joe,
It's
just that point,
helpful.
youth unemployment has gone up to over 16%. I mean, that's a huge worry.
It's a
and
10-year
DJ is suggesting
high
it's going to get
rise.
worse.
Of course, we want to see young people being able to access work. And there are many factors, some of which people have now talked about around technology changes and so on, that have contributed to this across many different countries. But I'm glad Emily brought this back to the health of the economy, because I think, DJ made the point earlier, if we're building more housing, putting more money into capital investment, and we have more wages in people's pockets, we've got inflation coming down, interest rates coming down, retail index is going up, there are lots of positives.
We have to stop your list there and say thank you very much to DJ for joining us today with your experiences. Thank you very much. And thank you to all my guests.